Billionaire finds a woman sleeping on the street at 3 a.m. What he discovers will shock you. A billionaire tech mogul who had sworn off love forever makes a decision at 3 a.m. that changes everything. What he discovers about the homeless woman sleeping outside his building will leave you speechless. But first, tell us in the comments, what city are you watching from? And don't forget to rate this story from 1 to 10 at the end. The rain hammered against the floor-to-ceiling windows of the 47th floor as Ethan Crawford stared out at the Seattle skyline. At 29, he was the youngest tech billionaire in the Pacific Northwest, having built an empire from nothing more than a college dorm room idea. But tonight, success felt as cold as the storm raging outside. His assistant had left hours ago. The entire Carter Technologies building was empty except for security guards and the occasional night janitor. Ethan loosened his Italian silk tie and rubbed his tired eyes. Another 18-hour day, another few million in revenue, another night going home to an empty penthouse where even the echo of his footsteps sounded lonely. He gathered his things and headed for the private elevator. The city looked different at 3 a.m., vulnerable, honest, stripped of its daytime pretenses. As his black Tesla pulled away from the building, Ethan noticed something that made him tell his driver to stop. "Pull over here, James." "Sir, it's 3 a.m. and pouring rain. Just pull over." Outside the main entrance of his building, partially hidden beneath the overhang, a young woman was curled up on a bench. She wore layers of mismatched clothing that were obviously inadequate for Seattle's harsh October weather. Her dark blonde hair was damp from the rain, and in her arms, she clutched what looked like a worn manila folder. Ethan had walked past homeless individuals countless times in his life. Seattle had a significant homeless population, and like most successful business people, he wrote checks to charities and called it enough. But something about this particular woman made him pause. Maybe it was the way she held that folder like it contained her most precious possessions. Maybe it was how young she looked, probably mid-20s, too young to be sleeping rough in downtown Seattle. Or maybe it was something else entirely, something he couldn't name but felt deep in his chest. "Wait here," he told James. Ethan stepped out into the rain, immediately feeling the cold water soak through his expensive suit. He approached the bench slowly, not wanting to startle her. Up close, he could see she was shivering despite being asleep. Her face, though pale from exhaustion and cold, had delicate features that struck him as oddly familiar. Without thinking about why, Ethan shrugged off his cashmere overcoat and gently laid it over her shoulders. She didn't wake up, just unconsciously pulled the warm fabric closer to her body. The folder slipped slightly from her grip, and Ethan carefully repositioned it in her arms. Then he did something even more inexplicable. From his pocket, he pulled out a small, antique wooden music box, dark walnut with intricate carvings that had faded with age. He'd carried it for years, a childhood memento he couldn't bring himself to leave at home, but never really understood why he kept. Acting on pure instinct, he placed the music box on the bench beside her and stepped back. The woman stirred slightly, a small smile crossing her lips, as if she were having a pleasant dream. Ethan stood there for a long moment, rain dripping from his hair, watching this stranger sleep peacefully wrapped in his coat. Something about the scene felt significant, like a photograph he would remember for the rest of his life. "Sir," James called softly from the car. "Should we go?" Ethan nodded and walked back to the Tesla. But as they drove away, he found himself staring out the rear window until the bench disappeared from view. The sound of early morning traffic jolted Lily Parker awake. She sat up quickly, disoriented and momentarily panicking about where she was. Right, the bench outside Carter Technologies. She'd found the relatively dry spot around midnight after spending 14 hours job hunting with nothing to show for it but sore feet and a stack of rejection letters. But something was different. Very different. First, she wasn't cold anymore. An incredibly soft, expensive-feeling coat was draped over her shoulders. The fabric was cashmere. Lily recognized it from the brief period she'd worked at a high-end department store before being laid off. This coat probably cost more than she'd made in 3 months. Second, there was a small wooden music box sitting on the bench beside her. Lily picked up the box with trembling fingers. It was beautiful, clearly antique, with hand-carved details that spoke of craftsmanship from another era. The wood was worn smooth by countless hands, and there was something about it that made her heart race for reasons she couldn't explain. "What?" she whispered to herself, looking around the now busy downtown street. Morning commuters hurried past, none of them looking like the type to leave expensive gifts for homeless strangers. The city bus she needed to catch was approaching, and Lily quickly gathered her things. She wrapped the mysterious coat around herself, picked up the music box and her folder of resumes, and ran for the bus stop. "Morning, lady," grumbled the bus driver as she climbed aboard. "You're cutting it close." "Sorry," Lily said, digging through her pockets for exact change. To her surprise, she found the money easily, though she could have sworn she only had enough for a one-way fare yesterday. She found a seat near the back and carefully examined the music box during the 40-minute ride to her shared apartment in the Fremont neighborhood. The craftsmanship was extraordinary. Whoever had made this was a true artist. Lily gently opened the lid. The melody that began to play hit her like a physical force. It was hauntingly beautiful, a simple, melancholy tune that seemed to speak directly to her soul. But more than that, it felt familiar. Not like she'd heard it before, but like it was part of her, woven into her memories in ways she couldn't access. Tears began streaming down her face without warning. They weren't tears of sadness exactly, but something deeper and more complex. The music seemed to unlock emotions she didn't know she'd been carrying, memories that felt just out of reach. Other passengers were starting to stare, so Lily quickly closed the box, but the melody continued playing in her head for the rest of the journey home. Her apartment was a small, cramped space she shared with 2 other women in similar financial situations. Maya worked nights at a diner, and Jessica was between jobs after her retail position was eliminated. They'd created an unspoken system of mutual support that had kept all 3 of them housed when any one of them might have ended up on the streets. "Girl, where did you get that coat?" Maya asked as Lily walked in. Maya was just getting home from her shift, still wearing her diner uniform and smelling like coffee and bacon. "Someone left it for me," Lily said, realizing how strange that sounded. "Along with this." She showed Maya the music box, and her roommate's eyes widened. "Lily, that thing looks like it belongs in a museum. Who just leaves stuff like that for random people?" "I don't know," Lily admitted. "But Maya, listen to this." She opened the box again, and the melody filled their small living room. Maya's expression shifted from curiosity to something like awe. "That's beautiful," she said softly. "But honey, you look like you've seen a ghost. What's wrong?" Lily wiped her eyes, not realizing she'd started crying again. "This song, I feel like I've heard it before, like it means something important, but I can't remember what." Maya sat down beside her on their second-hand couch. "Maybe it's just one of those universal melodies, you know, something that touches everyone who hears it." But Lily shook her head. "No, it's more than that. It's like it's calling to a part of me I forgot existed." She spent the rest of the morning getting ready for another day of job hunting, but her mind kept drifting back to the music box and the mysterious coat. Who had left them, and why did the melody feel like a key to a door she couldn't find? Meanwhile, across the city in his minimalist penthouse apartment, Ethan Crawford was having the most productive morning he'd had in months. For the first time in years, he'd slept deeply and dreamlessly. He'd woken up refreshed, energized, and strangely optimistic. His housekeeper, Mrs. Chen, noticed the difference immediately. "Mr. Crawford," she said, as she served his usual breakfast of egg whites and steel-cut oats, "you seem different today. More cheerful." Ethan paused with his coffee cup halfway to his lips. She was right. He did feel different, lighter, somehow. Like a weight he hadn't realized he was carrying had been lifted from his shoulders. "I had a good night's sleep," he said, which was true, but didn't begin to explain the strange sense of rightness he felt. What he didn't tell Mrs. Chen was that he'd been thinking about the woman on the bench all morning. Not in any inappropriate way, but with a curiosity that surprised him. He wanted to know her story. Was she okay? Was she warm? Did she have somewhere safe to stay? These weren't the kinds of thoughts that usually occupied Ethan Crawford's mind. He dealt in algorithms and market projections and quarterly reports. Human suffering was something he addressed through charitable donations and tax write-offs, not personal involvement. But as he rode the elevator to his office that morning, Ethan found himself hoping he might see her again. Lily's job search that day was more frustrating than usual. She'd applied to 17 different positions ranging from administrative assistant to barista to retail clerk. Each interview felt like a performance where she tried to convince strangers that, despite her current circumstances, she was worth taking a chance on. The music box had become her good luck charm. She kept it carefully wrapped in a scarf inside her bag, and whenever she felt her confidence wavering, she would touch it through the fabric. The gesture seemed to give her strength, though she couldn't explain why. Her last interview of the day was at a small non-profit organization that provided job training for people experiencing homelessness. The irony wasn't lost on her. "I see you have experience in customer service and some bookkeeping," said the interviewer, a kind-looking woman named Patricia Williams. "But there's a gap in your employment history." "Can you explain that?" Lily had rehearsed this answer dozens of times, but it never got easier to say. "I was laid off from my last position 6 months ago when the company downsized. I've been looking for work ever since, but the market is tough right now." What she didn't say was that she'd been evicted from her apartment, had lived in her car until it was repossessed, and had been staying in shelters or on the streets for the past 2 months until Maya and Jessica offered her a spot on their couch. Patricia studied Lily's resume, printed on paper that was starting to show wear from being carried around the city. "Your references are strong, and you clearly have the skills we need. But I have to ask, do you have stable housing? This position requires regular attendance and professional appearance." Lily's heart sank. This was the question that had derailed several promising interviews. "I'm currently in temporary housing, but I'm working on finding something permanent." Patricia seemed to consider this. "The position is part-time to start, 20 hours a week at $15 an hour. Not much, but it comes with benefits including access to our emergency housing assistance program. Are you interested?" Lily felt tears of relief welling up in her eyes. Yes, absolutely. "When can you start?" "Tomorrow, right now, whenever you need me," Patricia laughed. "Let's say Monday morning. That gives you the weekend to sort out any logistics you need to handle." As Lily walked back to the bus stop, she felt lighter than she had in months. It wasn't much, but it was a start, a foot in the door, a reason to hope that things might finally be turning around. She touched the music box through her bag and whispered, "Thank you," to whoever had left it for her. 3 weeks into her new job, Lily had settled into a routine that felt almost normal. She worked mornings at the nonprofit, spent afternoons looking for full-time employment or better housing options, and evenings helping Maya and Jessica with household tasks as a way of contributing to their shared living situation. The music box had found a place of honor on the small shelf above her sleeping area. She'd opened it every night before bed, letting the melody calm her anxiety and help her fall asleep. Sometimes she dreamed of a large, cold building filled with other children. Sometimes she dreamed of a dark-haired boy who made her laugh and told her wonderful stories. But the dreams were always hazy, slipping away as soon as she tried to focus on them. It was a Friday evening when everything changed again. Maya had convinced her to come out for drinks at a small dive bar in Capitol Hill. "You've been working non-stop for 3 weeks," Maya argued. "You need to have some fun. Besides, Jessica's friend is bringing some cute guys from her college class." Lily had protested that she couldn't afford to go out drinking, but Maya waved her concerns away. "First round is on me. You need this, Lil." The bar was crowded and loud, filled with young professionals unwinding after a long week. Lily felt out of place in her thrift store clothes, but Maya's enthusiasm was infectious. They found a small table in the corner, and soon Jessica arrived with 3 young men who seemed friendly enough. They were having a good time. Lily was actually laughing at something one of the guys was saying when she spotted him across the room. A tall man with dark hair was sitting alone at the bar, nursing what looked like an expensive whiskey and checking his phone. He wore a perfectly tailored suit that probably cost more than Lily made in a month. Even in the dim bar lighting, she could tell he was handsome in that polished, upper-class way that made regular people feel invisible. But there was something about him that made her stare, something familiar. "Earth to Lily," Maya said, waving a hand in front of her face. "You're staring at Rich Boy over there like you've seen a ghost." "Sorry," Lily said, tearing her gaze away. "He just reminds me of someone. Someone you know." "I don't think so. Maybe I saw him on the news or something." But as the evening wore on, Lily found herself glancing at the man repeatedly. He seemed as out of place in the dive bar as she felt, checking his watch and looking like he was waiting for someone who wasn't coming. There was a loneliness about him that she recognized, despite the expensive clothes and obvious wealth. Around 11 p.m., the man finished his drink and headed for the exit. As he walked past their table, his eyes met Lily's for just a moment. The contact lasted only seconds, but it hit her like an electric shock. His eyes were gray-green, like storm clouds over the ocean, and they seemed to look right through her in a way that was both unsettling and strangely comforting. Then he was gone, disappeared into the Seattle night. "Okay, what was that?" Jessica asked, having noticed the exchange. "What was what?" "That look. You two looked at each other like you were communicating telepathically or something." Lily shook her head, trying to dismiss the strange moment. "I think I've had too much to drink." But she hadn't had too much to drink. She'd nursed a single beer all evening. What she'd experienced was something else entirely. A recognition that defied logic, a connection that felt both impossible and inevitable. Ethan Crawford had never been to a dive bar in Capitol Hill before. In fact, he'd never been to a dive bar anywhere. His social life, such as it was, consisted of business dinners, charity galas, and the occasional industry networking event. He drank 15-year-old Macallan in private clubs, not beer from a bottle in places where the floor was sticky and the bathroom graffiti was more entertaining than most of the art in his penthouse. But tonight, he'd needed to be somewhere different. Somewhere that wasn't his office or his apartment or any of the other sterile spaces that made up his carefully controlled existence. The last 3 weeks had been strange for him. Ever since that night when he'd given his coat and music box to the sleeping woman, Ethan had found himself thinking about her constantly. He'd driven past the bench several times, hoping to see her again, but she was never there. He'd even asked building security if they'd noticed anyone sleeping rough in the area, but they had no useful information. His productivity at work had somehow improved, despite his distraction. His assistant, Margaret, had commented on his improved mood. Even his adoptive parents had noticed during their weekly dinner that he seemed more engaged, more present. But tonight, 3 weeks after their brief encounter, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that he needed to find her again. He'd spent the day in back-to-back meetings, closing a deal that would add another $50 million to Carter Technologies' valuation. But all he could think about was a woman whose name he didn't even know. Which was how he'd ended up in a dive bar in Capitol Hill at 11 p.m. on a Friday night, nursing an overpriced whiskey and feeling completely out of his element. He was about to leave when he saw her. She was sitting at a small table in the corner with a group of friends, laughing at something one of them had said. Her hair was different, cleaner, styled, and she wore clothes that actually fit. But there was no mistaking her face. It was the same woman from the bench, the one who had been occupying his thoughts for weeks. She looked good, healthy, happy. The transformation was remarkable. Ethan found himself staring, trying to work up the courage to approach her table. What would he say? "Excuse me, I'm the person who left you a coat and music box 3 weeks ago." That sounded like something a stalker would say. As he debated his options, she looked up, and their eyes met. The moment of eye contact hit Ethan like a physical force. Those dark blue eyes seemed to see straight through him, past the expensive suit and carefully constructed persona to something deeper. For a few seconds, the noise of the bar faded away, and all he could hear was his own heartbeat. Then the moment passed. Her friends said something that drew her attention away, and the spell was broken. Ethan finished his drink quickly and left the bar, his mind racing. She was here, in Seattle, and she was clearly doing better than she had been 3 weeks ago. Part of him was relieved. His small act of kindness hadn't been wasted on someone who couldn't benefit from it. But another part of him was disappointed that the encounter had been so brief. As he waited for his car to pick him up, Ethan made a decision that would change everything. He was going to find her again. The following Monday morning, Lily arrived at the non-profit office with a strange mix of energy and confusion. The encounter at the bar had stayed with her all weekend, playing on repeat in her mind. Those grey-green eyes felt significant in a way she couldn't explain. "You're distracted today," Patricia observed as Lily struggled to focus on data entry. "Everything okay?" "Fine," Lily said automatically, then reconsidered. Patricia had been nothing but kind to her, and sometimes it helped to talk through confusing feelings. "Actually, something weird happened Friday night." "Weird how?" "I was out with friends and I saw this man at the bar. Just a stranger. But when we looked at each other, it felt like I knew him from somewhere. But I'm sure I've never seen him before in my life." Patricia smiled knowingly. "That happens sometimes." "Maybe he just had one of those faces." "Maybe," Lily agreed. But she didn't think that was it. Around lunchtime, Patricia called Lily into her office. "I have good news and potentially better news," she said. "The good news is that you've been doing excellent work here, and we'd like to offer you a full-time position with benefits." Lily's face lit up. "That's amazing." "Thank you so much. The potentially better news," Patricia continued, "is that we've received a request from one of our major donors. They're looking to hire someone with your exact skill set for a much higher paying position. Customer service background, attention to detail, ability to work with people from all walks of life." "What kind of position?" "Executive assistant to the CEO of a tech company." "The salary would be 4 times what we can offer you here." Lily's excitement dimmed slightly. "I appreciate you thinking of me, but I don't think I'm qualified for something like that. I've never worked in tech, and I don't have the kind of education or experience they'd want." "Actually," Patricia said, "they specifically requested someone with your background. Apparently, the CEO values people who understand what it's like to struggle. He thinks it would bring a different perspective to his organization." "What company?" "Carter Technologies. Ever heard of it?" Lily shook her head. "Should I have?" "It's one of the fastest growing tech companies in the Pacific Northwest. Very successful, very prestigious." The interview would be tomorrow if you're interested. Lily felt a flutter of anxiety mixed with excitement. It seemed too good to be true. What's the catch? No catch. Just an opportunity. What do you think? That evening, Lily researched Carter Technologies extensively. The company had been founded 5 years earlier by a young entrepreneur named Ethan Crawford, who had turned a college dorm room startup into a billion-dollar enterprise. The company specialized in developing software solutions for healthcare systems, with a focus on making medical technology more accessible to underserved communities. She found several articles about Crawford himself. He was 29, Harvard-educated, and notoriously private. The few photos she could find showed a serious-looking man in expensive suits, usually photographed at business events or charitable functions. There was something vaguely familiar about his face, but she attributed that to having seen his picture in news articles. What struck her most was the company's mission statement: technology should serve humanity, not the other way around. Our goal is to ensure that everyone, regardless of economic status, has access to the tools they need to live healthy, productive lives. It sounded like exactly the kind of organization she wanted to work for. Ethan had spent the entire weekend planning his approach. He couldn't simply show up at her workplace and ask her out. That would be inappropriate and potentially frightening for her. But he could create an opportunity to see her again in a professional context, which was how he'd come up with the idea of hiring an executive assistant. It was actually a position he needed. Margaret had been encouraging him to hire additional support for months, as his workload had expanded beyond what one person could reasonably manage. And when he'd called Patricia Williams at the non-profit organization to make his monthly donation, he'd mentioned his staffing needs. Actually, Patricia had said, "I might have the perfect candidate for you. She's been working here for a few weeks, but she's overqualified for what we can offer. She has excellent people skills, attention to detail, and she understands what it's like to overcome challenges." "Tell me more about her," Ethan had said, trying to sound professionally interested rather than personally obsessed. "Her name is Lily Parker. She's 26, has customer service and bookkeeping experience, and she's one of the most resilient people I've ever met." She was going through a rough patch when she started here, but she's pulled herself together remarkably quickly. Ethan's heart had nearly stopped. Lily Parker. Finally, he had a name. "I'd like to interview her," he'd said immediately. "Tomorrow, if possible." Now, as he sat in his office waiting for Lily to arrive, Ethan felt more nervous than he had before major business presentations to Fortune 500 companies. He'd rehearsed what he would say, how he would act professionally while also trying to determine if she remembered him from the bar. Margaret knocked on his door at exactly 2 p.m. "Mr. Crawford, your interview candidate is here." "Send her in." The door opened, and Lily Parker walked into his office. She wore a simple black dress that looked professional but inexpensive, and her dark blonde hair was pulled back in a neat ponytail. She carried herself with quiet confidence, but Ethan could see the slight tremor in her hands that suggested nervousness. When their eyes met, he saw a flicker of recognition cross her face, quickly followed by confusion. "Miss Parker," he said, standing and extending his hand. "Thank you for coming in. I'm Ethan Crawford." "Mr. Crawford," she replied, shaking his hand. Her grip was firm, but he noticed she was studying his face intently. "Thank you for considering me for this position." They sat down across from each other, and Ethan pulled out her resume. It was a single page, printed on slightly worn paper, but what was there was impressive given her circumstances. "I see you have customer service experience and some bookkeeping background," he said, falling into professional mode. "But there are some gaps in your employment history. Can you explain those?" Lily straightened her shoulders. "And I was laid off from my previous position 6 months ago when the company downsized. Since then, I've been actively looking for work while also dealing with some personal challenges. I've been honest about my situation with Patricia Williams, and I believe she's passed along the relevant information." "She has," Ethan confirmed, She mentioned that you've been experiencing housing instability. That's correct. But I want to be clear that it hasn't affected my work performance. I've been reliable and professional in my current position, and I would bring the same commitment to this role. Ethan nodded. He admired her directness. This position would involve managing my calendar, handling correspondence, coordinating with other departments, and occasionally representing me at business functions. It can be demanding and unpredictable. Are you prepared for that? Yes, Lily said without hesitation. I work well under pressure, and I'm used to adapting to changing circumstances. They talked for another 20 minutes about her experience, her goals, and her understanding of the company's mission. Lily was articulate, thoughtful, and clearly intelligent. But throughout the interview, Ethan kept catching her looking at him with that same expression of confused recognition he'd seen at the bar. Finally, he decided to address it directly. "Is there something you'd like to ask me?" he said. "You seem like you have a question." Lily hesitated, then decided to be honest. "I know this might sound strange, but have we met before? You look familiar to me." Ethan's pulse quickened. "You look familiar to me too," he admitted. "I was at the Alibi Room in Capitol Hill Friday night. Were you there?" "Yes," Lily said, her face lighting up with recognition. That's where I saw you. You were sitting at the bar." "Small world," Ethan said, smiling. It was the first genuine smile he'd given during a business meeting in years. "Very small," Lily agreed, relaxing slightly. "I remember thinking you looked out of place there." It's not exactly my usual scene." They looked at each other for a moment, and Ethan felt that same electric connection he'd experienced at the bar. But now, in the professional setting of his office, it felt both more and less appropriate. "Well," he said finally, "small world aside, I think you'd be an excellent fit for this position. The salary is $75,000 annually, plus benefits including health insurance, dental, and a housing assistance program we offer to employees. Are you interested?" Lily's eyes widened. That's more than I was expecting. It's what the position is worth," Ethan said simply. "Quality people deserve quality compensation." "Yes," Lily said quickly. "Yes, I'm definitely interested. When can you start?" "Whenever you need me." "How about Monday?" "Perfect." As Lily left his office, Ethan felt a mix of satisfaction and anticipation that he hadn't experienced in years. He'd found her again, and now he'd have the opportunity to see her every day. But he'd also created a professional relationship that would make any personal connection infinitely more complicated. Still, as he watched her walk toward the elevator, Ethan couldn't bring himself to regret the decision. Lily's first week as Ethan Crawford's executive assistant was a whirlwind of learning new systems, meeting new people, and trying not to feel overwhelmed by the luxury of her new work environment. The Carter Technologies building was a gleaming tower of glass and steel in downtown Seattle, with modern art installations, ergonomic furniture, and amenities that seemed designed to make employees never want to leave. Lily's new desk was outside Ethan's corner office on the 47th floor, with a view of Elliott Bay that took her breath away every morning. Margaret, who had been promoted to Director of Operations, spent the week training Lily on Ethan's schedule, his preferences, and the complex web of relationships that kept the company running smoothly. "He's demanding but fair," Margaret explained as they went through the filing system. "He expects excellence, but he also recognizes it when he sees it. The key is being proactive. Anticipate what he needs before he asks for it." "What about his personal life?" Lily asked, trying to sound professional. "Does he have family obligations I need to work around?" "Mr. Crawford is very private," Margaret said carefully. "He has dinner with his adoptive parents every Sunday, and that's usually the only personal commitment on his calendar." No girlfriend, no social life to speak of. It's actually kind of sad. As the week progressed, Lily began to understand what Margaret meant. Ethan's schedule was packed with meetings, conference calls, and business obligations from early morning until late evening. He rarely took lunch breaks, and she often saw him at his desk when she left for the day at 6 p.m. But despite the busy schedule, Ethan was nothing like the cold, demanding boss she'd expected. He was polite, patient with her learning curve, and, surprisingly, considerate. When he discovered she was taking the bus to work, he arranged for the company car service to pick her up each morning. When she mentioned she was looking for an apartment, he had HR send her information about the company's housing assistance program. "You don't have to do all this," Lily said when he told her about the transportation arrangement. "I'm fine taking the bus." "You're my assistant," Ethan replied. "If you're late because of unreliable public transportation, it affects my schedule. This is just good business." But Lily suspected it was more than that. She'd caught him watching her sometimes when he thought she wasn't looking, with an expression she couldn't quite interpret. It wasn't inappropriate or unprofessional, but there was definitely something more than employer interest in his gaze. And if she was being honest with herself, she felt it too. Ethan Crawford was attractive, successful, and surprisingly kind. More than that, there was something about him that felt comfortable in a way that didn't make sense given how briefly they'd known each other. On Friday afternoon, as she was organizing his calendar for the following week, Ethan appeared at her desk with 2 cups of coffee from the expensive machine in his office. "He thought you might need this," he said, handing her one of the cups. "It's been a long week." "Thank you," Lily said, accepting the coffee gratefully. "And thank you for everything else, too. The job, the transportation, the housing assistance information. I know you didn't have to do any of that." Ethan sat on the edge of her desk, a gesture that was probably too casual for a CEO, but felt natural between them. "Everyone deserves a chance to succeed," he said. "You just needed someone to believe in your potential." "Well, I promise not to let you down. I don't think you could if you tried." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, sipping their coffee and looking out at the Seattle skyline. It felt remarkably intimate for a professional relationship, and Lily found herself wondering what it would be like to know Ethan Crawford as a person rather than as her boss. "Can I ask you something?" she said suddenly. "Of course." "Why did you really hire me? And don't say it was just because I was qualified. Patricia told me you specifically requested someone with my background." Ethan was quiet for a long moment, considering his answer. "I think everyone deserves to have someone take a chance on them," he finally said. "And you impressed me, both in the interview and before." "Before?" Ethan hesitated, then seemed to make a decision. "Can I show you something?" He disappeared into his office and returned with a small object wrapped in a cloth. When he unwrapped it, Lily gasped. It was an antique wooden music box, identical to the one she'd been given 3 weeks earlier. "This is the music box I've carried since I was a child," Ethan said softly. "I gave one just like it to someone a few weeks ago." Someone who needed kindness more than I needed a childhood memento. Lily stared at him, pieces of a puzzle clicking into place. "That was you, outside the building that night. You left me the coat and the music box." "Yes. But why?" "I don't know," Ethan admitted. "Something about you. I couldn't just walk away. I'd never done anything like that before in my life." Lily felt tears forming in her eyes. "I still have it. The music box. It's been like a good luck charm. I listen to it every night." "I'm glad," Ethan said simply. They looked at each other, and for a moment, the professional boundary between them completely dissolved. Lily saw not the successful CEO, but a man who had stopped on a rainy night to help a stranger. Ethan saw not his employee, but the woman who had stirred something in him that he'd thought was long dead. "Ethan," Lily said softly. "Yes. Thank you. For everything. For seeing me when I was invisible." Before either of them could think better of it, Ethan leaned forward and kissed her. It was gentle, tentative, and over almost before it began. But in that brief contact, both of them felt something profound shift between them. When they pulled apart, Lily was looking at him with wide eyes. "I'm sorry," Ethan said immediately. "That was inappropriate. I shouldn't have." "Don't apologize," Lily interrupted. "Please." They stared at each other, both breathing slightly harder than normal, both aware that they had just crossed a line that would change everything between them. "What happens now?" Lily asked. "I don't know," Ethan admitted. "I've never been in this situation before." "Neither have I." The elevator chimed in the distance, and they heard voices approaching. Ethan quickly stepped away from her desk, putting professional distance between them again. We should talk about this," he said quietly. "But not here." Lily nodded. "Okay." "Dinner?" Ethan asked. "Tomorrow night? Somewhere we can have a real conversation." "I'd like that." As Margaret and several other employees emerged from the elevator, chatting about weekend plans, Ethan retreated to his office. But not before giving Lily a look that promised their conversation was far from over. Lily spent the rest of the afternoon trying to focus on work, but her mind kept drifting back to the kiss and what it meant. She was falling for her boss, which was complicated enough, but she was also falling for the stranger who had shown her kindness when she needed it most. And somehow, she had the feeling that their story was just beginning. Saturday evening found Lily standing in front of her closet, trying to figure out what one wore to dinner with a billionaire. Not a business dinner with her boss, but an actual date with a man she was quickly developing feelings for. "You're overthinking this," Maya said, sitting on the bed and watching Lily try on her fourth outfit. "He's already seen you at your absolute worst, sleeping on a bench in the rain. Anything is an improvement." "That's not helping," Lily said, examining herself in their small mirror. The black dress she'd worn to the interview seemed too formal, but her casual clothes felt too casual. "Here," Jessica said, appearing in the doorway with a dress draped over her arm. "Wear this. It's the one I bought for my cousin's wedding but never wore." The dress was perfect, a deep blue that brought out Lily's eyes, simple but elegant, appropriate without being overdressed. "Are you sure?" Lily asked. "Positive." "You need this more than I do." As Lily got ready, she found herself touching the music box that sat on her shelf. The melody had become part of her nightly routine, but tonight it felt especially significant. Tonight, she would finally understand the full story behind the mysterious gift that had changed her life. Ethan picked her up at 7 p.m. in his Tesla, but instead of the expensive downtown restaurant she'd expected, he drove them to a small Italian place in the Fremont neighborhood. "I thought you might be more comfortable somewhere low-key," he explained as they walked inside. "And this place has the best pasta in Seattle." The restaurant was cozy and unpretentious, with checkered tablecloths and wine bottles used as candle holders. It was exactly the kind of place Lily would have chosen for herself. "How did you find this place?" she asked as they were seated at a corner table. "I've been exploring different neighborhoods lately," Ethan said, "trying to see the city from a different perspective." They ordered wine and appetizers, and for the first hour, they talked about everything except the elephant in the room. Lily told him about growing up in foster care, about her dreams of working in social services, about her plans to go back to school someday. Ethan talked about building his company, about the pressure of success, about feeling isolated despite being surrounded by people. I've never told anyone this, Ethan said as they shared a bottle of Chianti. But sometimes I think I built the company as much to prove something to myself as to help other people. I wanted to matter. To be someone who couldn't be forgotten or left behind. What do you mean, left behind? Lily asked gently. Ethan was quiet for a long moment, seeming to debate whether to continue. I was adopted when I was 8, he finally said. From a group home called Riverside Children's Center in Portland. Before that, I'd been in the system since I was 6. Lily felt a chill run down her spine. Something about his words triggered a memory she couldn't quite grasp. Well, my adoptive parents are wonderful people, Ethan continued. They gave me every opportunity, every advantage, but there was always this feeling that I was missing something. Like there was a piece of my life that got left behind when I became Ethan Crawford instead of... Instead of what? Lily whispered. Instead of Eddie, he said. That's what everyone called me at Riverside. Eddie Morrison. The wine glass slipped from Lily's hand, shattering on the floor and spreading red wine across the white tablecloth. Other diners turned to look, but Lily barely noticed. The sound of breaking glass had triggered something, unlocked a door in her memory that she hadn't even known existed. Lily, are you okay? Ethan asked, reaching across the table for her hand. But Lily was somewhere else. Someone else. She was 6 years old again, standing in a large, cold room filled with other children. She was crying because her foster placement had fallen through, and she was back at Riverside for the 3rd time. And a dark-haired boy named Eddie was sitting beside her, telling her a story about a princess who was sad until she met a prince who made her laugh. You used to tell me stories, she whispered, staring at Ethan's face with new recognition. And when I cried, you would make up these elaborate fairy tales to distract me. Ethan's face went completely white. Lily Rose, he said softly. You're Lily Rose Parker. Your favorite color was purple. You hummed when you were nervous. You had a stuffed rabbit named Mr. Floppington that was missing one ear. And you, Lily said, tears streaming down her face. You had a music box that played the most beautiful song. We used to listen to it together in the reading corner when the other kids were being loud. They stared at each other across the wine-stained table, both remembering a friendship that had been torn apart when Ethan was adopted by the Crawford family and Lily was transferred to a different facility. Eddie, Lily whispered. Lily Rose, Ethan replied. Around them, the restaurant continued its normal evening bustle, but for both of them, the world had just shifted on its axis. They weren't just boss and employee, or even two adults who were attracted to each other. They were best friends who had been separated for 20 years, who had somehow found their way back to each other against impossible odds. The music box, Lily said suddenly, that night when you left it for me. You said you didn't know why. I think I know now, Ethan said. Some part of me recognized you, even when my conscious mind couldn't remember. But how is this possible? What are the odds that we'd end up in the same city, that I'd end up working for you? Maybe it's not about odds, Ethan said, reaching across the table to take her hand. Maybe some connections are strong enough to survive anything. They left the restaurant without finishing their meal, both too overwhelmed by the revelation to think about food. Ethan drove them to Kerry Park, where they sat on a bench overlooking the Seattle skyline and tried to process what they'd discovered. I remember the day you left, Lily said, curled up beside him on the bench. I was so angry that your new family didn't want me too, Mrs. Peterson tried to explain that it wasn't about me, but I was 6. I thought you were choosing them over me. I cried for weeks, Ethan admitted. I kept asking my new parents if we could visit you, but they thought it would be better if I made a clean break from my past. They meant well, but it felt like abandonment. Yes. They sat in comfortable silence, looking out over the city where they'd both ended up, despite being separated by hundreds of miles and 20 years. "What does this mean for us now?" Lily asked eventually. "I don't know," Ethan said honestly. "But I know I don't want to lose you again, even though it complicates everything." The job, the professional relationship, especially because it complicates everything. Lily, you're the first person I've felt connected to in 20 years. The first person who sees me as Eddie instead of Ethan Crawford. I can't pretend that doesn't matter. Lily turned to face him fully. "I feel like I've been looking for you my whole life without knowing it. Like I've been waiting for something I couldn't name." This time, when Ethan kissed her, it was with the weight of 20 years of missing each other behind it. It was a kiss that spoke of childhood promises and adult longing, of friendship that had survived separation and love that had grown despite distance. When they pulled apart, both of them were crying. "So what happens now?" Lily asked. "Now," Ethan said, "we figure out how to build a life together. However complicated that might be. Your stockholders are going to love this. Billionaire CEO falls for homeless woman turned employee." "Let them talk," Ethan said firmly. "Some things are more important than public opinion." As they drove back to Lily's apartment, both of them felt like they were finally coming home after a very long journey. They had found each other again, and this time, nothing was going to tear them apart. The next few weeks were a careful dance of professional discretion and personal discovery. At work, Lily and Ethan maintained appropriate boundaries, though anyone paying close attention might have noticed the way they looked at each other, or how Ethan's entire demeanor seemed lighter and more relaxed. Margaret certainly noticed. "I don't know what's gotten into Mr. Crawford lately," she confided to Lily one afternoon. "But he actually laughed at my joke about the quarterly reports yesterday. In 15 years of working for him, I've never heard him laugh at anything." "Maybe he's just having a good week," Lily said carefully. "Or maybe," Margaret said with a knowing smile, "he's finally found someone who makes him happy." Outside of work, Lily and Ethan spent every possible moment together, rediscovering their friendship and exploring their romantic connection. They visited places that held significance from their childhood, talked for hours about the years they'd spent apart, and slowly built something new on the foundation of their old bond. Ethan had been right about the media attention. When a gossip blogger spotted them having dinner together and identified Lily as his new assistant, the story exploded across social media. Tech billionaire's Cinderella romance and From Homeless to Penthouse, the real-life fairy tale, were typical of the headlines. "I'm sorry," Ethan said, when the first wave of articles appeared. "I should have prepared you for this." "It's okay," Lily said, though she felt uncomfortable with the public scrutiny. "I knew dating you would come with complications. Are you having second thoughts?" Lily considered this. The attention was overwhelming, and some of the articles painted her in an unflattering light, suggesting she was a gold digger who had manipulated her way into Ethan's life. But when she looked at him, really looked at him, she saw Eddie, her childhood best friend who had grown into a man who was kind, generous, and deeply in love with her. "No," she said firmly. "No second thoughts." 3 months after their reunion dinner, Ethan made a decision that surprised even him. "I want you to move in with me," he said one evening as they walked along the waterfront. "Ethan, that's a big step." "I know. But Lily, I've spent 20 years feeling like something was missing from my life. Now I know what it was. It was you. I don't want to spend another night sleeping alone when I could be sleeping next to my best friend. What about work? Won't that make things even more complicated?" "Probably," Ethan admitted. "But I've been thinking about that too. What if you didn't work for me anymore?" Lily stopped walking. "Are you firing me?" I'm offering you something better, Ethan said, pulling out his phone and showing her a business plan he'd been working on. Your own non-profit organization, focused on providing job training and housing assistance to people experiencing homelessness, fully funded, with you as the executive director. Lily stared at the document, speechless. It was everything she'd ever dreamed of doing, outlined in perfect detail. The Lily Rose Foundation, she read aloud. If you want it, Ethan said, you'd be helping people the way Patricia helped you. Making a real difference. But the startup costs alone must be money I'm happy to spend, Ethan interrupted. Consider it an investment in something I believe in, someone I believe in. That night, Lily moved her few possessions into Ethan's penthouse apartment. As she unpacked her carefully preserved music box and placed it on the nightstand next to his identical one, she felt like she was finally where she belonged. 6 months later, the Lily Rose Foundation had helped over 200 people find stable housing and employment. Lily's story had inspired donations from across the country, and what had started as Ethan's generous funding had grown into a sustainable organization with multiple revenue streams. More importantly, Lily and Ethan had built a relationship that combined the easy comfort of lifelong friendship with the passion of newfound love. They complemented each other perfectly, her warmth balancing his intensity, his business acumen supporting her compassionate vision. On a rainy Thursday evening in November, exactly 1 year after the night Ethan had first seen Lily sleeping on the bench, he found himself standing in the same spot, holding a small velvet box. Lily had been working late at the foundation office, and Ethan had texted her to meet him outside the Carter Technologies building. She'd protested that it was pouring rain, but he'd insisted it was important. "You're crazy," she said, when she found him standing in the rain without an umbrella. "It's freezing out here." "Do you remember this spot?" Ethan asked, gesturing to the bench where she'd once slept. "How could I forget? It's where you saved my life." "No," Ethan said, stepping closer to her. "It's where you saved mine." Before Lily could ask what he meant, Ethan dropped to one knee right there on the wet sidewalk, in the exact spot where he'd first laid his coat over her shoulders. "Lily Rose Parker," he said, opening the ring box to reveal a perfect solitaire diamond. "You've been my best friend, my missing piece, and the love of my life. Will you marry me?" Lily started crying immediately, not caring that she was getting soaked by the rain. "Yes," she sobbed. "Yes, of course, yes." As Ethan slipped the ring onto her finger, both of them remembered 2 6-year-olds making a promise to be best friends forever. Some promises, they realized, are worth waiting 20 years to keep. The wedding took place 6 months later at Riverside Children's Center, the group home where they'd first met. Ethan had made a substantial donation to renovate the facility, and the staff had been thrilled to host the ceremony that brought their story full circle. Mrs. Peterson, now in her 70s but still working with children, officiated the ceremony. Many of the guests were people whose lives had been touched by the Lily Rose Foundation, formerly homeless individuals who now had jobs and housing, families who had been reunited, children who had been given second chances. "I've been privileged to witness many love stories over the years," Mrs. Peterson said as she began the ceremony, "but I've never seen anything quite like this. Eddie and Lily Rose found each other as children, lost each other to circumstance, and found each other again as adults. Their story reminds us that love is the most powerful force in the universe, stronger than separation, stronger than time, stronger even than despair." When it came time for vows, both Lily and Ethan had prepared lengthy speeches. But when the moment arrived, Ethan simply said, "Lily Rose, I promise to never let go of your hand again." And Lily replied, "Eddie, I promise to keep listening to our song for the rest of my life." As they kissed, Sealing their marriage, the children's choir from Riverside performed the melody from their music boxes, the song that had connected them as children and brought them back together as adults. In the audience, Maya wiped tears from her eyes and turned to Jessica. "I still can't believe this is real." "Believe it," Jessica whispered back. "Some people really do get their fairy tale ending." After the ceremony, as Lily and Ethan danced their first dance as husband and wife, they talked quietly about their future. "Any regrets?" Ethan asked, spinning her gently around the small dance floor they'd set up in the children's center gymnasium. "Only one," Lily said, smiling up at him. "What's that?" "I wish 6-year-old me could see this. She was so sad when you left. She would have loved knowing that you'd come back for her eventually." "She knew," Ethan said confidently. "Somewhere deep down, she knew we'd find each other again." As the evening wound down and guests began to leave, Lily and Ethan stood together in the reading corner where they'd spent so many hours as children. The space had been updated over the years, but it still had the same cozy feeling they remembered. "Ready to start our new life, Mrs. Crawford?" Ethan asked. "I've been ready for 20 years, Mr. Crawford," Lily replied. They left Riverside Children's Center hand in hand, driving off into the Seattle night toward a future they would build together. In Lily's purse were both of their music boxes, finally reunited just like their owners. And somewhere in the distance, if you listened carefully, you could still hear the faint echo of their song playing on the wind. The sound of children's laughter filled the backyard of the Crawford family home on Mercer Island. Lily looked out the kitchen window and smiled at the sight of Ethan teaching their 4-year-old daughter, Emma, how to throw a football, while their 2-year-old son, James, toddled around trying to catch bubbles. The Lily Rose Foundation now operated in 12 cities across the country and had helped over 5,000 people transition from homelessness to stable housing and employment. Lily had been featured on the cover of Time magazine as one of the most influential social entrepreneurs of her generation, but her favorite accomplishment was the family she'd built with Ethan. "Mama!" Emma called out, running toward the house. "Daddy says we can have ice cream if you say yes." "Daddy is trying to spoil you," Lily said, scooping up her daughter. "But I suppose it is a special day." It was indeed a special day. That morning, Lily and Ethan had returned from the courthouse where they'd finalized the adoption of 3 siblings from Riverside Children's Center, ages 6, 8, and 10, who would be joining their family permanently. Maya and Jessica, now both married with children of their own, had brought their families over to celebrate. Even Margaret was there with her husband, grilling burgers and telling stories about the early days of Carter Technologies. As the afternoon turned to evening and their guests began to head home, Lily found herself sitting on the porch swing with Emma on her lap, watching Ethan play with James in the yard. "Mama," Emma said thoughtfully, "Daddy says you used to be sad before you met him." "I was sad sometimes," Lily admitted, "but that was a long time ago. And then he found you and made you happy." "We found each other," Lily corrected gently. "And yes, we made each other very happy." "Like a fairy tale?" Lily smiled, thinking of all the fairy tales Ethan used to tell her when they were children. The very best kind of fairy tale. The kind that's real. That night, after all 5 children were asleep in their beds, Lily and Ethan sat together on their back deck, looking out over Lake Washington. Between them on the table were their 2 music boxes, still playing the same melody that had connected them 26 years earlier. "Any regrets?" Ethan asked, the same question he'd asked on their wedding day. "Just one," Lily said, smiling at their running joke. "Yeah, what's that?" "I wish we could go back and tell our 6-year-old selves that everything was going to be okay, that the sadness wouldn't last forever." "Maybe we just did," Ethan said, gesturing toward the house where their children slept peacefully, knowing they were loved and wanted and would never be abandoned. As the music boxes played their gentle melody into the Seattle night, Lily and Ethan Crawford held hands and planned their tomorrow, grateful for a love story that had survived everything life could throw at it and emerged stronger than ever. Some fairy tales, they had learned, are worth waiting for. What did you think of Lily and Ethan's incredible journey from childhood separation to finding each other again? Their story proves that true love really can conquer all obstacles. If this story touched your heart, please give it a rating from 1 to 10 in the comments below and tell us what part moved you the most. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit that notification bell so you never miss another amazing story of love, hope, and second chances. Thank you for watching, and remember, sometimes the most beautiful love stories are the ones that take a lifetime to unfold.